Hello. As always, since this video is, you know, being made, but there will be a non-video podcast thing, I got to go over to my little recording studio and figure it out so we can get started. Welcome to I do what I want. Sorry, I'm blanking. It's late. Sorry, I'm getting this podcast out a little bit late. But yes, so I do what I want. This is the podcast put on by me, Hollis Joe McCullum. I am an author. I do some other stuff too, but this podcast is about kind of writing journeys and everything surrounded around, you know, books and stuff and writing and all of that. Before I get into the episode today, which is actually going to be talking about some insights on my own self publishing journey, which I hope you will enjoy, I am going to make a very exciting announcement for me. You all know, if you've listened to some previous episodes, that I have another book coming out in the next maybe 2 months at this point. Getting excited that the cover design is underway and it is looking gorgeous. My extremely talented friend, who also happens to be a designer, is kind enough, or was kind enough, to agree to help me out, and she is just absolutely knocking it out of the park. I am adoring everything that she has sent me so far. So yes, Spare the Swallow cover reveal should be coming out. I'll post it to my Instagram, which I think auto post to my author Facebook. But as I think I've mentioned before on this podcast, I kind of never check my Facebook. Not a huge fan of. I'm lazy about checking my social medias. I'm pretty much only on Instagram and occasionally YouTube. So if you want to talk to me, hit me up on Instagram. I am right there. and Yeah, that'll be beginning of August. Hopefully, we will have the cover reveal, and then yeah, then I just got to get it into publishing, which is what we're talking about today. And I wanted to talk about self-publishing because I was actually talking with my friend Jay, who is so sweet and listens to the podcast. So thank you, Jay. Hey, and he and I had a conversation a couple weeks ago, where we just he's just one of those really cool, intellectually curious people, and you can have all sorts of conversations with him. And we ended up talking about just traditional publishing versus self-publishing, and he said, "This is really interesting information. You should do an episode about it." So thank you for the content, my friend, and that would be great. By the way, he and his wife, actually, Hay, who is also a wonderful friend of mine, they own a cafe here in Swanee, Georgia, called Zoom Coffee Roaster. That's ZOOM, and it's right off of the corner, like Scales Road and McGinnis Ferry. If you are in Swanee, Georgia, the coffee is amazing. The baked goods are absolutely delicious, and if you're around, I strongly recommend visiting because they're wonderful people. They have wonderful, delicious treats in the form of coffee and tea and many like sandwiches and and egg buns and all that delicious stuff. So it's all homemade by them. They roast their own beans. Fantastic people, love the conversations, and love spending my Saturdays with them. So, what is self publishing? First and foremost, self publishing is, self publishing versus traditional publishing. That's a little easier to explain. So traditional publishing is what we all probably imagine, right? We think, okay, so author, writer does books, and then they then they will find a publisher for, a really popular publisher that everyone has heard of is Penguin Random House, probably, or somebody like that, or Bloomsbury Press, whatever. They're hundreds of them out there, and they send, them a well, they usually and that's the other thing, usually you go through an agent, but we'll get into that. Basically, the publisher, if they read your manuscript, if they accept it, then, they'll send you a nice fat check for, like, somewhere, tens of thousands of dollars saying, "Yeah, we love your book. Here's money. Now we're gonna publish it," and then they take it from there. Then they take the editing and all that stuff, and you sit back and frankly with, yeah, and then that's it, and then once they're done putting it out there and putting your book out on the shelves, then you get to sit back and collect royalties, and they, are supposed to handle I've never been traditionally published, so, if you know something that I don't know about the process, please let me know. I'm just trying to give a very, 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 generalized idea of what traditional publishing is, and then you collect royalties, and obviously they take a cut, and that's that. With self-publishing, you as the author, you don't get a big fat check for tens of thousands of dollars upon having your manuscript accepted. You don't have to get acceptance from anyone to be self-published, really. You just have to have money, which which is kind of nice. Now, and I'll get into this later. There are a lot of vanity presses out there and self-publishers who will charge you more or less or da da da. I'll get into that later. But with self-publishing, usually what happens is, you type everything up. You have to find or do it yourself, depending on your skill sets and personal skill sets. Like I'm using a designer for my second book, but I actually designed the cover and everything for my first book. To Save a World, which is available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com, and you can order it from any bookstore in the world, quite frankly, and, got 4.8 stars on Goodreads and 4.7 stars on Amazon, so I'm saying over 28 reviews on Amazon and, like, 10 or 11 reviews on Goodreads. Anyway, I feel like confident, just FYI. But I did all the design for that book, and which cut costs hugely. But as a self-publisher, you have to find your own designer, you have to pay for all of that. You pay for through the publisher, the self because you still have to pay someone to print your book. And of course, it's cheaper if you just do an ebook or Kindle version because there's no hard copies. Personally, which can do extremely well, by the way. Authors who so many people read ebooks these days. Personally, I am a more I like to read books. I don't like to read on my electronic device. I prefer to read the hard copy book, and so I also prefer to publish in both because that's the kind of reader I am. So I want to provide my readers with both options. And you just pay for it yourself. And then the other thing is you are liable to do all your own marketing, all your own branding, everything. Every All the responsibilities are on you when you self-publish. Now, with self-publishers, there are options a lot of the time where they'll help you with marketing and so on and so forth. But of course, that's more money. And it's usually anywhere between $1,500 to $5,000 to self-publish, depending on all of the factors, design and length of your book and whether you go with tradition, the just the electronic version or whatever. There are so many different factors, but the thing with self-publishing is, I do strongly recommend getting your book, edited, but, you still have creative control over your book. When a traditional publisher basically, that check for tens of thousands of dollars is them purchasing your work. They're buying it from you. That's what that check is for. And you still get royalties, but they have bought that from you. And that means you have given up creative control. which is a very frightening statement to an author. Like my baby manuscript that came from my brain, and I birthed it from my brain and my heart and all of that. Like, now I don't have creative control over it. Yeah. Traditional publishers now have creative control, and unless you happen to be like a Ken Follett or a James Patterson, or someone like that, who is such a well-established author in their own right, that they can demand creative control because they've earned it. Over, because even them, I'm sure, with their first books, that were, because back then traditional publishing was one of the only things you could do. Back then, self-publishing wasn't really a big thing when those guys got started. They just had to get through that roughness and get to the point where they were so popular that they got to demand creative control over things. But with self-publishing, we have control. And so that's fun, and that's what we like. So that is essentially it. I hope that, Google it if you want more clarity. I'm trying to keep things not so long, and I'm probably going to go off on a little tangent when I'm talking about the vanity presses here. So, moving on, I'm going to just give a little short thing, taking you through when I published my first book, because kind of taking you through the steps that I went, and my journey is different from other authors' journeys. Everybody does it a little differently. I definitely made a lot of mistakes. I'm still making mistakes. I'm better now. But this is the journey that I know, and hopefully some of the things that I'm going to tell you about what I regret, what I don't, so on and so forth, are going to help others who are looking into self-publishing, or maybe you've already self-published, but you're hitting stumbling blocks as well. Usually people hit slightly different ones. So, hey, if you hear something that maybe I don't know, hit me up, message me. I would love to hear from you. So if after listening to this podcast, you're like, oh, what's also really helpful is XYZ. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Comment on the video on YouTube, DM me on Instagram. On Instagram, I am at Hollis Joe McCullum. Uh, as mentioned, I really don't check Facebook. So if you message me on Facebook or something, uh, it's going to be a while before I see that one. Instagram or commenting on YouTube is faster. Or on my website, you can actually email me through my website, hollisjoemccullumauthor.com. And I would love to learn more. So if you know something I don't, or if you just have questions for me, or whatever, just like let me know. I'd love to hear it. So when I was ready to get To Save a World published, of course, I had the dream of having it traditionally published. I think a lot of first time authors, they have their or first time, you have your manuscript in your hands, you finished it, it's so awesome, and it's a huge accomplishment. Even if you never publish, by the way, just finishing a manuscript, finishing a book, that's huge. That's a big deal, and you should be really proud of that. So, even if you never want to publish it, or you never end up doing so, just understand that you've already accomplished a a big thing, and that's wonderful, and congratulations to you. So when I first started, I decided the first thing I did before I even started sending out query letters or anything else, which, by the way, at this point, very clueless person. FYI. I looked into it a little bit, but I was super clueless, just to let you know. I was like a little babe in the woods, as far like many first time authors. And I decided to get my book officially copyrighted through the Library of Congress, which really easy to do. I did it through LegalZoom because they just handle all the paperwork. It was about well, that was the first time I did it a few years ago. That was about like $70. I think inflation has happened because that was I want to say that was like 2014 that I got it copyrighted, but it made me feel better. Talking about the copyright, and I copyrighted my second novel as well. The copyright is actually unnecessary. I do it because it makes me feel better. It makes me feel like my intellectual property is safer. It just makes me feel more fortified against anyone who not that I don't think I've ever run into a situation where someone has tried to steal my work at all, but I have friends who have had issues with that, who are artists as well as writers and things, and then, just little here and there's where everyday people who sometimes don't even realize what they're doing will take your intellectual property and use it and plagiarize it and put it on a CD cover or something, and then you're like, whoa, 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 you don't have permission to use that, and I feel like having that copyright just gives me a stronger standing in case anyone ever did, which I don't think they ever will. But yes, that it just made me feel better, and honestly, $100 for peace of mind to me, well worth it. So, and that will take and by the way, getting something copyright written through the Library of Congress, like any government office, that will take months. So once you submit everything, then and they let you know. It can take like up to 6 months. I think it on average for me has taken about 4 months. Uh, and it is just a comfort thing for me. Officially speaking, you technically, if you just write, you know how when you open a book and there's the page that has the copyright, it just says like copyright 2022, Hollis Joe McCullum, whatever. That's legally, as far as I understand it, all you need for a copyright. That's it. You're done. Like you're good. You don't need the official Library of Congress copyright. You are covered saying this is my intellectual property if you just write those words in your published manuscript, like on that little page right after the title page, open any book in your house, any book at all, and you will see what I'm talking about. And yeah, so legally speaking, as far as I have been told by multiple other people who have published, the only copyright you actually need to do is and your own name saying this is mine. And that's great. You have claimed your work. Fantastic. Good job. So that's actually all you need to do. Again, I personally, if people ask me what my preference is still to have a little extra peace of mind and feel a little more covered and get it officially copyrighted through the Library of Congress. And if you're listening outside of the United States, I'm sure whatever your government body is. Here, and I'm sure you can Google whatever your government body is for copyright information, and that'll be great for you here in the United States. It's the Library of Congress. So that is something I wanted to say about copywriting, which is what I learned later. Um, and then I also honestly didn't realize that you couldn't just submit directly to traditional publishers. I didn't realize you couldn't. I didn't. I It sounds really naive, and it was, but it's true. I didn't realize that you couldn't just like write a letter and say, please read this. And I mean, I knew that like the chances of it being read were maybe slim to none, but you can't even send it. Like traditional publishers, there are some like sometimes they'll have an open call, and there are some publishers like Penguin that not 100% of the time, but will occasionally open themselves up for authors and writers to directly submit to them, which if that is your dream to be traditionally published, watch out for that, because then you don't have to go through an agent. But with most traditional publishers, you need a literary agent to submit for you. And that's like a whole other painful step in the process. At the time, I actually on the same day, I so going back so on the same day that I received my notice, because I was waiting for my copyright notice to come back before I felt comfortable putting my manuscript out into the world for people to potentially publish. On the same day that I actually got my copyright notice in the mail, I got another letter in the mail. And I found it at the moment, I was really excited because I didn't know any better, but it was, really exciting because I got my copyright. Yay, that was fun. And then I also got another letter from Dorrance Publishing, and I had never heard of them, before. Again, I was very naive. I hadn't done a ton of research and all of that, which, everything was so bright and shiny for me. But I got a letter from this vanity. It's a vanity press, I now know, called Dorrance Publishing, and Dorrance Publishing, they are now they. I will say it's not like they're an illegitimate company. They are a legitimate publisher, but I wouldn't, a lot of vanity presses are basically they basically swindle you out of money you don't have to spend. And yes, they publish your book for you. But that yeah, Dorrance basically was like, "Hey, we heard about your manuscript." So that means that they have somebody who like hears about new things coming through the Library of Congress because that's the only way they could have known I'd written a book, and then they basically just send probably a standard letter out to everyone that they hear about saying, "Hey, oh, you're special. We like you." And I don't remember, but it was extremely complimentary letter and too good to be true. And of course, the first time I read it, I was like, "Oh my god, somebody likes me already." But then the second time I calmed down after like a couple of minutes and I was like, "Okay, wait. Don't be dumb. You're an adult, chill. This there's no way. They don't, I'm a no-name person. I've never been published. Well, I'd been published academically a couple of times. And I'd like done some university publications and things, but I'd never been published as an author. I'd published a couple of papers that were on the ancient Etruscans and things like that. I'd never been, it's academia. No one would know who I was in the book publishing world or care at that. Uh, Not that they care now. Um, but basically, this one gets me into the vanity presses. I found that I started looking up, how to get published, and if you do that, like these vanity presses, like Dorrance Publishing, I wrote a list, Tate Publishing, Ex Libris. These were three that actually called me a lot, but, they send you letters, they'll call you on your phone, and they pitch to you. They're like, "Oh my god, we heard it's so awesome, ooh, oh, you sound like such a great writer, you sound like the next new thing in books," and, they're very splashy and schmoozy and all that stuff, and they're just and they'll tell you things like I had, the one of the representatives from the Vanity Press Ex Libris swear to me that Piers Anthony, published with them, and Piers Anthony is a, very well-established, fantasy author. His heyday was kind of in the '80s as far as when his books were being released and everything. I read a lot of his stuff, that the Incarnations of Immortality series that he did was really cool. The Xanth series. He's got a lot of great books. But they if you haven't heard of Piers Anthony, he's really fun fantasy author, fantasy or sci-fi. If you like that stuff, I recommend it. Um, but they were telling me that he published with them, and I was like, well, why would Piers Anthony do that? Like, Piers Anthony, like, He's one of those guys that's got publishers, like, he's at least in the fantasy genre, he's got enough, like, he would have creative control, he would have, like, all of that, like, he wouldn't need you. Why that so they were trying to butter me up and trying to get me to trust them, but, that statement 'cause I never I knew better, but because I was learning and I was honestly trying to learn, I would talk to them on the phone when they would call me and I would say, "Okay, well, what's your process? What happens?" And I would get it all and it was and it was the same spiel every time. It was just compliment after compliment and frankly, a lot of vanity presses you have to watch out for. I do want to say I know Dorrance Publishing in particular. There is something that they're pretty shady. There and I have a little list of some, like, the most shady, um, vanity presses to watch out for that I Googled for this podcast for all of you. And, and and they are one of the more shady ones, and one of the things that like, they will take your book, they will charge you, like, 5 grand or something. That's what they were quoting me, like, 5 grand or something around there, which is ridiculous. And and that's to publish, then, in paperback and ebook, and they said, "Oh, yeah, we'll do, like, 1 press release for your book after it's published," which is just 1 press release, really 5 grand. They'll do the cover design, they all claim their designers are amazing, which I'm sure there are some good designers who work for vanity presses, but, and then you also have, the really important that I'm trying to get to is something called the ISBN number. Uh, Authors will know exactly what this is, but the letters are I as in intelligent, S as in Sam, B as in Benjamin, N as in Nancy, ISBN. And that is the identification that's that is the international identification number for your book. So, for example, there's something called the Ingram list, which is the international like register of published books. And when someone wants to purchase your book, like a Barnes and Noble, for example, or any bookstore anywhere, they will look it up by the ISBN number. And that's how they find you and etc. The thing is, something that I learned is that whoever owns that ISBN number, which by the way should always be the author, the person who owns that ISBN number should always be the person who wrote the book. It's, and at least that's my personal. I don't in traditional publishing actually the publisher probably owns that ISBN number because the author gives up creative control, but the person who owns the ISBN number over has creative control over the book and has control over the sales. They're the ones who can control where the book is available, how it's available, everything, which is a really, 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 really big deal. So, say in my lovely dreams that To Save a World becomes something that maybe people want to read in Spanish, which is not available in Spanish right now, because I wrote it in English and I don't speak Spanish, so I'm a good tourist, but I don't actually, I can't. But you would then say, oh well, if Spanish speaking world wants my book, then you'd want to get it translated into Spanish and then distribute it there, right? I can't do that unless I own the ISBN number. Can't, even though it's my book. If I don't own that ISBN number, I can't have it translated into another language and distributed in another language. I can't. I can't I can't re-release my own book. So, a lot of authors will re-release and things like that to, maybe with a new cover design, change something snazzy, maybe you add a new chapter. I don't know. There's a lot of ways to do a re-release. A lot of the time it's just the same book, but with a different design or maybe like a cool like leather bound edition or whatever. Um, but you can't do those like the person who has the power to do all of those things, which can earn you a lot of money from your book, a whole other demographic with the language and hey, those of us who are especially fans of series like, Harry Potter's a perfect example. Like people will already own like the little Harry Potter paperbacks, but then you hear about the really cool like House of Gryffindor release of like the really like cool like old tomey looking like Gryffindor or Ravenclaw or whatever themed whole box collection, even though you already have all those same books at home and you've already read them, if you're a huge fan of that series, you might run out and get a new edition of it because that darn it looks awesome on your shelf. So that kind of, but if you don't own your own ISBN number, you are not the one who has control over any of those decisions. And also, you are not in control of the profits either. That's another difference between the traditional publishing as I understand it. Again, if I'm wrong, please correct me. Email me, let me know. I could be wrong. I'm not perfect. But the in traditional publishing, the publisher probably owns that ISBN, and they are the one. They get paid. They're the one who earns the money from the book. They're the ones who get all that, and then they give the author their cut. It's not that the author doesn't. I'm not saying that traditional publishers don't give authors a fair shake, but because they do have complete control over that book, and also selling rights as the movie too. That's another thing. Like what if you want the book to become a film, or Universal Studios or Paramount wants to buy the book to potentially translate it into a script? Well, they wouldn't be buying it from you if you don't own that ISBN number. The person who owns the ISBN number gets to sell it. They're the ones who get the however many thousands of dollars from Paramount if they decide to purchase the book. And then the person who owns the ISBN number, they get to decide how much money they give you for that deal. Ooh. And that doesn't sit well with me, and that's something that I really like. But Dorrance Publishing and a few of the other vanity presses, I call out Dorrance in particular because I read in the contract, because I actually asked them to send me a contract because I was curious. I knew I was never going to sign it, but I wanted to see the terms. I wanted to know. And in the contract, they actually clearly stated that they they would be the ones to own the ISBN number. And thankfully, naive as I was, I had done enough research to know that absolutely not. Were they ever, or should anyone besides me own that ISBN number? So that is something that I will say, make sure you own it. Now, some vanity presses to avoid, and I'm just going to give you a few: Dorrance Publishing, Abbott Press, Ex Libris, apparently, Alliant Press, AlphaScript, America Star Books, Archway Publishing, and Tate Publishing. Which, by the way, Tate Publishing, they market themselves as like a super Christian, a publisher, and they rely a lot on that sort of thing. And yeah, but they're one of the scammers. Now, that all said, I actually did end up going with self-publishing through a vanity press called Page Publishing for my first book. I wouldn't do it again. I I didn't have the worst experience. I will say, like, I read the contracts. I own everything, and because I did my own cover design, and when I negotiated the contract with them, I made sure I owned everything. I think they did try to swindle me a couple times. They tried to be a little shady with me in the making of the contract, but I made sure that 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 was covered, and I ended up not, I ended up spending about as much as it's just a slightly more than it would cost to self-publish as a result, to be honest. But a lot of that was because I put it in the contract that I was doing the design, and it would have been $1,000 more if I didn't do my own design. So, just FYI, if you do have that skill set, that like half of publishing costs are the design, because that's a lot of work. And those artists deserve to get paid, by the way. But if you are lucky enough, if you know how to do it yourself and you like your own, if you like what you do in graphic design enough to design your own book cover, then yeah, I would say save $1,000. Or if you have a friend or a family member who is a good designer and who can help you, yeah, or honestly, Fiverr. There's there's a lot of really, good designers on, Fiverr, which is a website where you can go and not just for cover design, but there are tons of artists they'll do a quick logo for you, they'll do a cover design, they'll do flyers, whatever, 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 and, they're cheaper. Because they these a Fiverr, it's like it's called Fiverr, like, "Hey, I'll do it for 5 bucks," kind of thing. It's a lot of it costs more than 5 bucks, but a lot of them will do something quick for a lot less money, and a lot of the people on Fiverr are, they're probably graphic design students who are still in school, just trying to make a little bit of extra money, and they don't have the experience yet to charge more, once they once they get a little more experience under their belt, that sort of thing, then yeah, they're going to start charging the hourly rate that actually pays the bills and that sort of thing. But that's a good resource for you if you're looking for inexpensive design work, because there are some really talented people on there, and if you can find them and get them before they have the experience to charge more money, then, then kudos to you. Another really amazing resource is called reedsy.com, reedsy.com. And this is a self-publisher's dream. I'll get a little more into that, but designers for page layouts, cover design, all of that. That's something Reedsy can help you with, as well as basically anything having to do with the self-publishing process. So they're an excellent resource, and I will mention them again at the end of my spiel here. So I ended up going with Page Publishing. I negotiated the contract, which I have I was a project manager for several years. I'm a little more versed in contract negotiation than some other people. So I at least knew what I was doing on that end. But honestly, ultimately, the reason I decided to go with a vanity press, because I for because I had it copywritten in 20, like, early 2014, something like that, April, I want to say. And then I was published in 2017, July of 2017, when the book was officially published. I honestly just wanted someone to hold my hand. I did. I did. I wanted somebody to hold my hand. That's what I wanted, and and I got it. It wasn't, and I say I wouldn't do it again. So Page Publishing legally absolutely held up their end of the contract. Um, but they also did the bare minimum. The person who, was my, like, contact representative, uh, just at first, like, the first few emails, super responsive. And then you could tell, like, I had to hound her just to get things done. Their editors were effectively useless. Um Honestly, like, I still open that book and see typos, and I'm mad because, of course, I edited my manuscript. I had, a few friends and family member, my beta readers read it, and I had some really great people send me edits, and I really appreciate those people. I did not have I mean, I had the page publishing editor go through it, but it was basically just like they were phoning everything in. All of all of the stuff they did, I feel like they were super duper lazy. And yes, technically, they, upheld everything they said they were going to do in the contract, and I'm really glad I negotiated it down to half of what they originally wanted to charge me. Um, Again, which ended up being the same amount you would pay to self-publish, without a vanity press as well, but most people, um I was able to cut a lot of corners because of certain skill sets that I thankfully possess. Most people aren't necessarily going to have those corners that they can cut so readily. Um, and and honestly, I would have been like for the amount of work that I put in with them, they were just phoning it in. They weren't I didn't feel taken care of in the way I hoped to feel taken care of. Uh, and again, they didn't violate any terms of the contract. They did everything that they said they were going to do. They pushed marketing packages at me like, "Please buy this marketing package and we'll be better." And I just went, "No, I'm not going to." And I didn't. And the book was published, it was released. They told me they were going to do a press release to like over 100 publications, which they did. But it was like one press release. And that was it. And they were like, "Yeah, if you want us to get you any radio or podcast interviews, it's $300 a pop," and that kind of thing. And I'm like, I could just go on LinkedIn or Facebook and like ask the podcasters directly if I can be on their shows, which I did a lot of. And I've been on over a dozen radio and podcast shows because I just asked. I just got on LinkedIn and I asked them if I could be on their show, and if they liked what I had to offer as a guest, they had me on their show. So, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of searching for the right people and all of that stuff, but you don't have to pay $300 per gig to get it done. But yeah, page publishing, that everything they said they were going to do. I own my ISBN number. I have total control over it. Um, Everything like that, but it's not something I would recommend. If you and I would say that if like me at the time, like I said, I just wanted somebody to hold my hand, I wanted somebody to guide me through the process. I know now that I just didn't need that. I didn't need that. All I really needed was to do a little more research on my own, which I ended up doing anyway because the person who was my, supposed representative was so lackadaisical about replying to me that I ended up finding my own answers in the first place and then emailing her back and saying, "Hey, I found what I was asking about. Can you just do this now, please? Can you just like do your job?" Like just begging you, please do your job. And so yeah, I would say that vanity presses, yeah, you can go through them. It is legitimate. It is legitimate publishing. There are those who you will own everything you need to own to have creative control over your manuscript. But overall, if you just put in more effort with your own research and things like that, and at the time, like I said, I didn't know about a lot of the resources. So things to avoid. Uh, I would say avoid vanity presses. Uh, do not take the first person who comes, obviously, the very first person who says, "Hey, I heard you got a book," they're probably, especially if you're a first-time author, not to poo-poo on excitement or anything, but nobody knows who you are yet. And unless the person who is coming to you and saying, "Hey, I've heard of you," and so on and so forth, unless that person happens to be a family or friend, a family member or friend who happens to work in the publishing business and maybe you just have an insider, if they're a stranger and they're saying that, then that means that, just through Google algorithms and whatever, they know that you're a first-time author who's trying to get published, and they're probably just looking to prey on you, to be blunt. And and honestly, I did learn a lot from having conversations with those companies and people, supposed literary agents and things like that, who, uh, like, I learned I'm not saying don't talk to them, because I actually learned a lot from those conversations, but don't take what they're offering. You know, uh, Talking to them helped me understand a lot of the language in the business, because they'll try to razzle dazzle you a little bit and throw out words like page layout and all these things that as somebody who worked they didn't, who worked at design agencies and things like that, I knew what a page layout was. But that's for those of you who don't know, the page layout is the interior when you open a book and you have chapters and da da da, like somebody has to design that. Like, that's not just typed and done. When you type something on your computer, it's not in a chapter format with the fonts and the titles. Like, everything has to be formatted, designed, fit to the page. If there are any graphics at the beginning of chapters, that's all design work right there, which again is another reason why design is like half of the cost of publishing, because it's not just the cover, it's the entire interior of the book and even the cover page. And if you're like a fantasy author like me, and or even a history, if you have a book that has a map or any sort of graphic in it, or illustrations, like children's book authors especially, it's all design. It's all design. So it's something, so a page layout is the interior layout of your book, but things like that. I did learn some industry terms. I learned conversationally what to look out for, just the tone of voice and all the promises made. And oh yeah, we think, anyone saying, oh, we think you're the next new thing, oh yeah, next fantasy's huge right now, they're schmoozing you too much, like, red flag, stop it. Like, so don't I know when somebody's legitimate if they're like, okay, do you, take it or leave it. If you don't want my offer, I'll just move on to the next author. And that person's more worth talking to, because frankly, they have a list of people they can call, and they don't necessarily need you. These people who are giving you all the compliments and all that other stuff, they need you because they want to suck you dry. They want your money, and that's their bread and butter. And they're not really like, the bread and butter of most of these vanity presses is not actually selling your books once they're published. It's you paying them to publish their books. That's why Dorrance Publishing is paying you like 5 grand, or asking for 5 grand to publish a book. And like, that's a lot of money. That's a ton of money. That's more than self-publishing would cost without a vanity press. So don't do that. So yeah, avoid the vanity presses. Just take your time. Avoid rushing. That's another big thing. Is I know, keeping in mind, and I read this. I don't have a resource to cite. I'm sorry, I read this so long ago when I was originally doing research, but from a very credible, from a very credible website that I read about. And I'm sure you can find this on other websites as well. The average first time author, if published, usually takes anywhere between 5 to 10 years to publish that first book. Just let that sink in. 5 to 10 years to publish the first book. That's how long it can take to get somebody to believe in you. Now, That's with traditional publishing, kind of use it as an earmark, that sort of thing, but even with, self-publishing, you want to make sure you have that. So, you wanna make sure you do your research, and the book, I would, I would have hired a professional editor to do, to edit To Save the World. Not okay, technically, again, I did hire a vanity I did hire Page Publishing, and their editor was supposed to be the professional editor, but, they did a terrible job, so they didn't I I happen to be a TEFL certified, teacher. I'm not, which is different, I'm a teacher of English as a foreign language, haven't been for many years, but the certification never expires, hee hee. So, but I mean, I'm grammatically, I'm very solid, and people who have edited my work really are like, "Yeah, I have a really difficult time finding grammatical errors," and they're like, "You're good," because, linguistically, that's just how I write. I'm used to it because I was trained to do that properly. Um, but I'm a human, and typos happen. I misspell words. And of course there's tools like Grammarly, of course. Everyone's heard of the Grammarly app, or or you can download it to your laptop as well. It's great. It works beautifully. Um, I don't use it all the time, but honestly, it doesn't. Grammarly works more like an editor. I've only used it like once or twice, I'll be totally honest with you. But it works like an editor in that it won't just catch your spelling and typos and grammatical errors. It'll actually make suggestions to you to say, "Hey, even though technically the sentence is correct, grammatically speaking, it's a little long or it's not phrased very well," and it actually does give you a better feeling. It helps you out a little bit more than your spelling and grammar check under your tools drop down menu on your Google Doc or Word doc. So I would recommend Grammarly. And I would recommend getting the services of a professional editor for your work. I think that it is a very valuable thing. They can point out a lot of things for you, and I do wish that I had done that with my first book, To Save a World. Now, again, I did have friends and family who ended up being excellent editors, and I'm extremely grateful to them. Thanks, mom. My mom is actually a wonderful editor, and she gives excellent criticisms because she's kind always, but she's honest with me, and I love that. And I love that. And it's something that you need. You need someone who's going to be truthful with you, because every author has a few rabbit holes in that manuscript that don't need to be there, or holes, or plot holes. There's like, "Hey, what happened to XYZ?" And you, as the writer, you were so wrapped up in your own world, you didn't realize that you forgot to say what happened to Bill, or whatever. As Bill just falls off the map, and no, you never hear from him again. But readers are gonna notice that, and an editor will catch that and say, "You need to say what happened to Bill," or "You completely mentioned, you went off on this little history lesson tangent," uh, guilty of creating, like, the fantasy history of the world, and, like, having a character muse on something for 3 pages, and it's just like, "This is a useless story, you don't need this in your manuscript, it has nothing to do with the plot." You could tap this down to like 2 sentences of like, "Oh, yeah, and he was daydreaming about the story of, you know, uh, I don't know, Paris." I don't know, whatever. I'm thinking about Troy, right now, but anyway, you they help you a lot, so get a professional editor, which, as I've mentioned, Reedsy, the reedsy.com, is an excellent resource. You can find editors there. You have designers for the interior, the exterior, everything you need for your book. They have all these articles on self-publishing and the do's and the don'ts, and it's an excellent community, it's free, freelancers and, all around the world for all of the services that you need to get your book published. And so I strongly recommend checking out Readsy, read those articles, get into it if you're interested in publishing. I wish I knew about Readsy before I published my first book, because it's extremely helpful, and I, again, strongly recommend it. And it's free. It's free information. It's free to look at the all the freelancers and, all the editors and designers that they have on their website, that are just hundreds and hundreds of them. And you can read through and get separate quotes from them, and it's a wonderful marketplace. And that's fantastic. It's just wonderful, and I think that it's a wonderful little writer community. And even if you just want to learn a little bit more about publishing, maybe you just are curious, and that's fine. Maybe you're not sure if you want to publish at all, and that's fine too. A lot of people just write things for themselves. Um, and that's great. I think you should. But yeah, it can help you, reading the articles and knowing the ins and outs of things that can help. And they even have like live chat with people where you could ask questions to the people who run the website, and they'll answer them for you, and it's fantastic. I strongly recommend checking out Readsy. Another thing you can do, which I strongly recommend, and honestly, a lot of people don't realize this, but other authors online are willing to help you. The world of writing, uh, I view it personally anyway, and I think other authors will probably agree with me, but I view it as actually less competitive and more harmonious. Because the thing about books is that there are always more readers. They'll read your book, great, yay, but then, they finish it. The reader always there's always a huge consumer base out there. So having another author out there who maybe is really similar to you, that's not your competition, that's your friend. Team up with them, ask them questions, because guess what? The people who read their books probably wanna read your books, and the people who read your books probably wanna read their books, so you can recommend for each other and help each other out. And a lot of authors, and I know that, with a few other authors online, myself, Trip Ainsworth, who wrote the Smoke Pit Fairy Tale sci-fi series. There are 9 books in that series, and I think he's still going, and it's super cool, by the way. But he's self-published, he has a lot of personal success with it. He sold over 5,000 copies of his first book, uh, entitled Smoke Pit Fairy Tales. It is the first book in the series. It's awesome. He works his butt off. He really does. He works really, really hard, and it shows. And he and I have helped each other. And I'm fantasy, he's sci-fi. Our books are actually very, very different. Of course, all everyone has different worlds and different ideals, but we actually have a lot of the same readers. And and frankly, I've read not all of his books, I'm getting to it, but they are good. I do enjoy them, but, we get distracted. And he's read my book, and it's great. And other authors like, Peter Richardson and other people online have other authors are willing to help each other, which is great because the readers always want more. And you, as an author, are just another consumer. And I know that's kind of mind-blowing, because a lot of the time in other industries, it's like, "Oh, well, that person's competition," because, like McDonald's and Burger King are competition in the fast food market, right? Because people in food tend to have more brand loyalty, right? Uh, and not to say that readers aren't loyal, but frankly, just because you have a favorite author, it doesn't mean you're not gonna read someone else's book. So, ask the authors online. I get questions, not a ton. I wouldn't mind getting more, honestly, you can DM me on Instagram. You can ask me. And I've had people just ask me questions. I've had people, um, and I actually, was really excited to a couple years ago, I helped a really talented writer, and I hope she does publish one day. Her name is Taylor. For her senior project, she was writing a novel, and she has some very creative ideas and really cool world. And I don't want to give anything away, but honestly, very talented. But she just needs some focus. And for her senior project, for her senior year, she wanted to write the book, which she did, and I was honored to be able to help her with that, and help her focus. And and again, I don't know everything, but I have a little bit more experience, and I can tell people how I focus my energies when I'm trying to get a book out. And she did. She got it done, and she made a great grade on that project because frankly, her writing is great. She really just needed a little bit of focusing and refinement. Her ideas were all hers, and they were stunning. And that's something that authors encourage each other a lot more so than the so-called competition does in other industries, because if we hold each other up, we have we have more together. Like, it's more beneficial. So yeah, talk to your other author friends online. Find other people who write your same genre, and just ask them. You can message them, just comment on their stuff, say, "Oh, that looks so cool." And it's reciprocity. Don't just take, give back a little bit too. Repost their stuff if you like it, buy their book, read it, write reviews for each other. You can hold each other up. You can do a lot of it for free. and and you help each other, and then it's great. And then you create this really nice relationship, and it grows, and then you all sell more books, because again, there are always readers. Take your time. Don't rush if you're in the publishing process. You don't have to go crazy I'm not saying spend years research. No, you don't have to do any of that. I'm saying just don't rush it. If it comes out of you and you find your way and everything falls into place with you within 6 months to a year, that's awesome. Fantastic. If that all feels right, great. But go with your gut. If it feels too fast, it probably is. If you're doubtful, probably just listen to yourself. Listen to your gut. Listen to that little voice in the back of your mind. Listen to the people who care about you, and just don't run, face first into a situation where maybe you're ending up spending more money. Now, for some insight for my next book, as I already said, I'm working with a great designer who I know personally, and I'm you know uh, paying her separately. But for publication, because I'm actually going to go through BookBaby, which is Amazon. It's just what Amazon calls their self-publishing. I think BookBaby was a separate company at one point. Amazon bought them, like they buy a lot of things. But I'm gonna go through them. And honestly, through my research, it works. I know they're a huge corporation, so on and so forth. But they organize everything so it's actually the distribution is great for you. You own your ISBN number, hugely important, as I've said, and you just get great distribution. It's all you can always get more books for yourself. They give you more copies. The prices are good, and you can pick and choose what services you want. If you don't want editing, they're not gonna they don't force anything down your throat. You basically are like, "I want this." You pick and choose what you want. They give it to you, and that's it. Like, obviously, I'm not paying for any design work because I'm just gonna upload print-ready files. And again, biggest way to cut costs. If you are self-publishing, The biggest way to cut costs is to get and again well, and again, if you don't happen to know someone or get a great deal, with a wonderful designer on Fiverr or Reedsy or something like that, then absolutely just go with the publisher because if you don't have personal connections or the skill set yourself, it's it's worth it to just have them do your book cover, because the book cover is hugely important. You need it to look good. Nobody picks up a book that doesn't look good. It doesn't matter how wonderful the insides are, because you know nothing about that book. The cover is extremely important. It's the first thing, first impressions, right? Old adages and whatnots. And so you need it to be beautiful and wonderful and all the things. So do not you can't skimp on the cover, but if you're looking to save some money and you have the skill sets or you can find someone that you think is going to do a wonderful job for less, design is the biggest chunk of change you can save. And and again, editing, I would recommend not skimping on that either. Save up some money for my about 300-page novel that I am self-published, that I'll be self-publishing. Um, it's going to be around $1,500. And that's with me getting some additional things, all of that. And again, I'm not paying them to design my book. I'm doing that separately. So I'll just upload the files for them. It's, but yeah, $1,500 is pretty darn cheap, but I would be paying over two grand, probably more like $2,500 if I were also having them do the design. So that's something to say. Get on social media. Don't be afraid to reach out, and don't be afraid to ask me questions too. That is kind of my publishing journey so far. I tried to keep it short, and this is like the longest episode in the podcast yet. So sorry about that. And I hope you learned something. Again, if you have anything for me, let me know. The next podcast. Uh, I should have already had this like pulled up in my brain. So this is the 10th of July. So my next podcast is going to air on July 24th, and I'm actually going to go on a trip to Las Vegas. I'm going to be leaving on the 27th, so you're going to hear me probably being very excited about that. I am not 100% sure what the topic is going to be yet. Perhaps another character study on the character of a Rom from To Save a World, because as I've discussed, I'm currently in the process of getting the sequel to that ready to go, and I have Spare the Swallow coming out this year, but early next year I hope to have the sequel published. And again, I'm just going with self-publishing because I'm done trying to get an agent, and I'm done trying to self-publish. It's a lot of heartache. To me, at this point, it feels like a lot of time wasted because Spare the Swallow has been ready for publication for years, but I actually was trying to get it self-published, or trying to get it traditionally published for a while, and I would get great feedback from the publishers because 'cause they'll send you feedback letters. Publishers and literary agents would actually say, "This is great. It's not right for us right now." And, that's fair, but when self-publishing is such a good option, why did I wait so long to do it? Don't be so focused on traditional publishing. I kind of feel like it's gonna start going the way of the birds, or the way of the dodo rather in a couple of decades. Not right away, but self-publishing is a pretty amazing beast, and it gives us control. So, thank you so much, everyone, for joining me and listening and sticking it out. And I hope to see you next week. Oh, shit. End stream. Sorry.